you're seeing a shift among Democrats because they realize that this has become a political liability. And when you have, as we played for you last week, the mayor of America's largest city, New York City, my hometown. I'm still a New Yorker, even if I'm currently hanging out in Miami. When you have a mayor of America's largest city saying that one issue will, quote, destroy the city, that starts to get people's attention. Now, the way the Democrats are trying to frame this, I should note, is that somehow when you have a Democrat White House pushing open borders Democrat policies, and then a Democrat state, New York, and a Democrat city, New York City, that are sanctuary jurisdictions, somehow it is the Republicans' fault. Or perhaps, Clay, this is a version of the always ready for the Democrats, Republicans pounce. You know, this is what they say. When Democrats have done something that is just so stupid, it's indefensible even to their own side, which the migrant crisis, particularly in New York, but in other cities as well, has become, it turns into Republicans are leveraging this. They are weaponizing this political issue. It's, well, you're the ones who did it to yourselves. You're the ones who refused to stop it. Here is Mayor Adams trying to do a little bit of damage control after the, but it's it's going to destroy the city, but it's Republicans' fault for talking about this. Play it.
Critics on the right have noted that New York City is a sanctuary city, and this migrant crisis comes with that territory. What do you say to those who think you relinquish your right to complain about the stresses it places on your city because of that?
Well, I think that those comments coming from those far-right Trump-like Republicans who are continue to try to distort the reality that we do not have real immigration reform, that we should allow a true decompression strategy, protect our borders in the right way, and make sure that when you look at this city, the status of right to shelter, of no one who created this decades ago took into account that we were talking about hundreds of thousands of people potentially coming to the city.
Okay, Clay, first of all, as we all know, here he is saying a decompression of security at the border the right way. You either tell people they can't do this or they keep doing this, right? That's step one. They won't say it because it has become a Democrat mantra that the more illegals, the better. This was interesting, though, over the weekend, just last couple of days. The Biden administration is considering now, and this is written up in the LA Times, forcing migrant families who enter without authorization, illegals, to remain near the border in Texas while waiting for asylum screening. This is now being considered by the Biden White House. Now, what they're going to say, Clay, is, this means we can concentrate the resources along the border so we can do this more efficiently. The reality is they're creating a remain in Texas policy, and, Arizona to some extent, New Mexico, but a remain in Texas policy for the migrants. They're going to try to federally force the migrants to stay at the border, near the border, so that LA, Chicago, and New York don't have to deal with this.
Okay, so yes, Texans, I would imagine, will be furious about this idea because it effectively makes the state of Texas responsible for the federal border crisis exclusively to a large extent. As you mentioned, Arizona, New Mexico, other crossing states become issues as well. But we're going to have Greg Abbott on tomorrow. I bet he will be teeing off. The governor of Texas right now will be teeing off on this. It's also important to point this out. Yes, Greg Abbott has bussed a lot of migrants. But I believe the number that Texas has sent on buses to New York City, Buck, is around 13,000. And the number of illegal migrants that the state of New York, and New York City in particular, is dealing with is over 110,000. So, yes, Texas has accelerated what is a mess all over the country for New York. But a lot of these migrants that are illegally entering the country are finding their way to New York, even without the help of the state of Texas.
I remember I'm going to tell you this too, because people have asked me this recently, said, hey, why don't you go down to the border? Biden administration will allow zero cooperation for Border Patrol agents and people like me, media. I would never call myself a journalist, but, media folks, to get some ground truth. They will not in any way be supportive of it. During the Trump years, man, I wanted to get up in a helicopter. I wanted to get out there and do ride-alongs, all this kind of, they were down for whatever ground truth you wanted. Now it's hide it from people. Don't let them see the processing centers. They claim it's about privacy for the individuals. Privacy? People are walking along in broad daylight, waving their hands, saying, hey, I'm an illegal. Give me my, my free food, my health care, and send me to New York City. But Clay, they were already being found, and this is true of some of the children that were being trafficked across the border as well. They're being found with instructions to basically get to New York City. And New York City is the greatest single concentration of illegals and has been for a long time in the nation, period. There are more illegals in the city of New York than any other city. You might have to look at Los Angeles County to get a full comparison, but for any actual urban area, New York City has been the place they want to go. Now, this raises some interesting questions. Why is dispersing the migrants going to be anything other than just putting the costs on other communities? This whole premise of illegals are no big deal is only possible because they've been dispersed into a country of 340 million. There are at least 20 million illegals in the country right now. I don't know. Maybe it's 30. Whatever number I say, people yell at me and say it's more than that. The official number is supposed to be like 12, which is a joke. It's at least 20.
6 million have come in since the Biden administration took over, right?
And since it was 12.
6 million. Yeah.
And we have to understand is that the legal system has been so convoluted and so intentionally. It's been so they've messed with the gears of our immigration system so much that nothing really makes sense anymore. Because what I'll say is these are illegals in New York, and they'll say, well, they're not illegals. They're awaiting asylum. To which I say, well, the asylum system is so backed up because of their illegal entry into the United States that it's like, the whole thing is clogged. And that's intentional. And so if it's clogged, it can't actually function in the way that we set the laws up to administer on immigration, administer these issues. And they're not going to get asylum because they're not actually asylum seekers. I come from a country that is not America, that is more poor than America, and that has a smaller or non-existent welfare state compared to America, is not asylum.
Yeah.
And it's actually really unfair to people all over the world who apply for refugee status here and have to go, and very few of them get it, Clay. People don't even think about this. Very few of them, by the numbers, actually get it. They're skipping the line. They're abusing the generosity of the American people. They're costing a lot of money. And here's the reason Democrats care about it. If this were 2025, if we were sitting here in January of 2025, you know what Eric Adams would be saying? We're going to get a federal bailout. We're going to get this going. There'd be far less. They have to go through this right now because there's an election coming up and the American people have started to figure out what's going on.
100% they have. And this is creating a massive issue in the left right now because this is important. The number one issue that Joe Biden is underwater in is the border. And he's underwater for basically everybody because everybody can see what a disaster the southern border is. And all Greg Abbott and others have done is shine a spotlight on how bad Texas and the southern border has become by making New York and Chicago and Washington, D.C. and other so-called sanctuary cities have to deal with the results here. And, Buck, this ties in to me in a big way with the challenge that New York City is facing. And this is what the mayor has started to say, too, is the $12 billion in budget costs, which they are projecting is going to be what all of these different
over the next 3 years, that's a projection, yeah, which is massive.
A huge, their budget falls apart because that's money that they have to pull out of schools and parks and all the other state functions that are involved. Now, the big issue here and the structural issue that is a major component of this is New York is losing many of its highest earning individuals, and they're deciding to go elsewhere. And a good example of this, Buck, is you went New York to Florida. Florida has more people now than New York. I believe that's correct. It has half the size state budget.
That is also correct, yes.
So what is New York spending double compared to Florida and getting oftentimes worse results despite spending twice as much money?
I can tell you because I looked at these numbers when I was thinking about these choices. The single biggest budget outlay in the New York State budget is Medicaid, healthcare, welfare. That is where most of the differential comes in. And then it's the major, no surprise, what would be covered under public sector unions, the major bureaucracies, education bureaucracy, retiree pensions for those systems, which are absolutely just padded and luxurious for a lot of these things. I mean, they've had to do these stories about like retired Metro North workers who are making like 200 grand for waking up, and they're on disability as a retired Metro North worker, but they're going jet skiing every weekend and they're in their 50s. I mean, the whole thing is a total, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the whole thing was such a scam. And Clay, I think the big debate now, because they're trying to use the pressure of the moment, is, well, let's give work authorization to the illegals in New York. I think after they're processed initially or they register for their asylum processing in one of these centers that have been refugee camps. These are refugee camps, everybody. Asylum, refugee, same process, basically. Only difference is where you apply for it. We have refugee camps operating in New York City. But I think they have to wait 6 months before they can get a work permit under the current statute. And this thing, all these statutes, all these laws, some they enforce, some they don't, some they interpret, some they don't. I mean, it's really, the whole thing is such a mess because they're doing this all in bad faith. The notion that these individuals, they're going to be, first of all, they're going to be competing for jobs at the lower end wage of the scale with other people who are already in the state of New York, which will depress wages. People say it won't. That's always not true. And beyond that, that they would be contributing markedly. They're not going to pay income taxes. You don't really pay income taxes if you make 25 grand a year. You get taxes from the government.
Half of the United States population pays zero in state income tax.
So if you're an illegal, this notion, we just want the illegals to contribute. You have these business owners who are saying, I read about this I read the debates over the weekend on this. Business owners, I would love to hire them. What about just paying higher wages for the people who already live in your state? There's a lot of people in New York. What is the situation in which somebody won't do a job unless they're an illegal who just arrived here? Probably one in which there's a degree of economic exploitation involved because they're in a insecure circumstance because they're not legally even allowed to be in the country. So, the mess, it just cascades, right? The whole thing just gets worse and we get deeper into this. And I honestly just think Democrats are at the point now where they view this as the last push to collapse our immigration system entirely, get a mass amnesty done. If Biden were to win another term and they were to get, people say, they need 60. They will change the filibuster rule, folks. They do not need 60. If they have 51 Senate seats and a majority in the House and Biden wins, God forbid all these things happen, amnesty is the end of the Republican Party. And I think everybody knows it. If they really get it, it's all over. I mean, you'll have a political realignment, a shift that will make the country unrecognizable politically, and then we'll deal with all the other ramifications of it as well. So I think the stakes are pretty high, Clay.